So I have to start with this question, which is, what is media these days anyway? How do you define quote unquote content?
Well, I think we all probably have different views on this coming from different backgrounds, but to me, really, we're all content creators. Everything is media. You're taking photos when you see something you're excited or inspired by. You're taking videos. You're sharing content with your friends, your community on various platforms. So really, what media was traditionally was, movies, TV, entertainment, and now it's become ingrained in our lives, and thinking about like, oh, it's helping us like document things, remember things, and also has become a form of connectivity as well as education.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that answer. I think media is now anything that is a platform for content creation and distribution. What I would say is that there continues to be an important role for what I would call news media, and that's across all different platforms, whether it is online only, like the Juggernaut, or a company that has some traditional print like our business, or broadcast television. There continues to be an important place for news media, and I would define that still as journalistic and fact-checked content that is created specifically with the purpose of informing.
Thank you for inviting us.
Oh, thanks for being here, Rafa.
I'm a huge fan of all of what.
He's also a lifetime subscriber, so.
The business of media hasn't changed. Like, there's only two or three ways you can make money in media. It's either you sell the audience or sell to an audience, or you do it for influence. Like, for instance, the All In podcast. They don't make money, but they channel it in 20 different ways. So that hasn't changed. So and will not change, because these are only so many ways to make money. The thing that, for me, having been in digital media for 25 years now, is just the continued proliferation of just the types and forms of media, and more to come, and continues to be. And so that's the fascinating part. The most fascinating, important change that's happening is the shift from quote unquote mainstream media to these alternative forms of media that are happening. You're certainly one of them. And the most powerful media company today in the world is YouTube. And so I would argue not even TikTok, it's YouTube, because of what particularly has happened over the last, 3 to 5 years, and how little trust there is in mainstream media. We can have that discussion if you want to, but YouTube has emerged to be this giant force. You can call it a company or platform, whatever it is, but it's where the action is for pretty much everything happening in long form or anything beyond really short form. So
we're live streaming on YouTube right now, actually, and I guess
yeah,
there you go. And I think TikTok is banned in India too, and YouTube it's one of its biggest markets. So I like that hot take right there. Let's talk about this, because there's always been this tension between an individual fame or the creator and the aggregate or the platform. How does, quote unquote, a platform like a Skift or a Fast Company succeed? And then, Ami, the counterpart to that is, how do creators succeed? So I'm curious how you guys view this tension.
I would say we continue to succeed in spite of the concerns about trust in mainstream media. We continue to succeed because we try to provide content that you can't find anywhere else, that our readers, and I would say more broadly communities, we're no longer just looking for eyeballs. We're looking for people that we consider members of the Fast Company community. And P.S., that goes back to the founding of Fast Company. It had almost a sort of cult-like status when it started almost 25 years ago. We succeed by providing content that you can't get anywhere else. And that's true of Inc. magazine, which is our sister publication. AI is not going to be able to create the Inc. 5000, which is the 5,000 fastest growing companies in America. We get that because companies trust us. They provide us with 3 years of either financial statements that are audited or tax returns. I mean, these are privately held companies, and they trust our brand enough to give us information that they don't even share with their employees, or they probably reluctantly share it with their accountants. And yet the value of becoming a member of the Inc. 5000 is so great that they are willing to share that with us. And so, machine learning cannot replace that. AI cannot replace that. Readers are going to come to us because we are the only place that can compile that information. And so I think that's how traditional media brands like ours continue to succeed.
I agree with that, where there is this level of credibility with traditional media, and that's what you're turning to because you trust them, because they have different checks and balances in place for things like the Inc. 5000 list. But when you're looking at platforms, it's a completely different business and business model. So you have, creators or entrepreneurs, they're sharing their lives, they're sharing interests, teaching, whether it's like sports, music, across the board, like really creating communities, which you touched on. And that's something I'm personally quite bullish on, is this concept of the community economy, which is creators creating their own communities, as well as brands and businesses really leaning into their communities, fostering them and creating opportunities for them, which is really what this event is as well. It's a community coming together IRL through a shared ethos and interest.
What was the question?
How do you view the tension between like creator and like an individual and fame versus like the platform and the aggregator? Because even in typical news media, that the way it can manifest is like, let's say a star reporter, like a Taylor Lorenz, just separating from the company or something like that. How do you manage that?
So I mean, we're a little bit in a bubble, and I'll take that bubble. B2B media. So I don't know if any of you know what Skift is, but Skift is covers the business of travel. So news, research, conferences, marketing services. We bought a consulting company last year for the travel industry. So we had our event last week. Our biggest event coincided. A bunch of our speakers went back and forth with her event as well.
I need to join that trio.
At times, most of the times, I don't think of ourselves as a media company. We are in the travel industry. We're serving the industry. So it just happens that the manifestation of what we do happens to be a media company. We do get reminded of it at events like this, or if you look at our margins compared to software, but that's a different conversation we can have. Because companies like ours are so hyper-focused on providing daily value to the user, they're less B2B, they're more business, we're more B2B, that for us, it's very much about how do we become a bigger and bigger part of the daily life of people in the travel industry. I don't care whether it's media or something else. I mean, as I said, we just bought a consulting company last year. It's doing very well. Will be 18% of our revenues this year. So it's growing. It's the fastest growing part of our business. So that's how we think about. It's almost better to figure out what your audience wants versus worrying about media or not media.
Going back to what audiences want, I know you know this number, Ami, but OnlyFans paid out $6.6 billion to its creators in 2023. And I think a lot of people after those numbers came out, were kind of shocked. They're like, why does OnlyFans work when, we've talked about the fact that other content is free? And so I'm just curious, what do you think about that business model worked while others didn't? And what are things that people can take away from like that perspective on creators and the creator economy?
A lot of people
it's much more valuable than people thought.
Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, that goes to show the power of creators and their communities and audiences and how they're able to monetize. And looking at why it works, it's because you have social media, like traditional social media that we're used to, that we don't pay for through Meta, X, all of those platforms where we're not used to paying for subscriptions, we're not used to paying for content. And now you have this new wave of platforms coming up, with OnlyFans being one of the first to really push, paywall content, subscription content. And now you see every platform, media company figuring out, how can I add this on? Even creators are thinking, oh, I can monetize through, whether it's, a platform or their own app. Like, they're finding ways that they're able to truly monetize their community without relying on, traditional brand deals, different partnerships. And that shows the power of content and the power of community.
Well, I want to talk also, using that example, like, what are some of your wildest successes, Stephanie and Rafat and Ami? Like, when we think about monetization and monetizing content, let's talk about that. What has been an idea that maybe you didn't expect to work that well, any part of your business, and then has surprised you in being so successful?
Yeah, and I've got one of my colleagues from Mansueto Ventures here, Zelini Parsad. She's in the back, and she's somebody who contributed to, I think, one of our. We had a hunch that something would be a success, but thanks to Zelini and some of her colleagues, it has exceeded our expectations, and that is community. When I got to Fast Company in 2018, I created something called the Fast Company Impact Council, and it was designed to be sort of the Fast Company's version of either the Wall Street Journal CEO Summit or CEO Initiative, or the Fortune has a CEO Initiative. And it's clear that if you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 or Global 500 company, you have plenty of clubs that you belong to. You go to Davos together. You go to various business roundtable meetings together. And we said, Fast Company has an audience of fast growth CEOs, but also chief design officers and chief technology officers and chief innovation officers. And none of those people have a home, and none of those people actually ever interact with each other. Sometimes the designers all go to the same conference, but they don't necessarily get to meet with fast growth company CEOs. So we said, how can we create a really cool dinner party where all of these people get together? And initially, it was frankly slow going in the beginning. We didn't know quite how to turbocharge it. And then Zelini and some of her colleagues said, well, why don't we take advantage of another asset that we already have inside the organization, which is our recognition programs. So Fast Company, often we honor the most innovative companies in the world every year. We recognize the most innovative design companies. And we said, well, while we're in the process of recognizing these companies, let's extend an invitation to their CEOs or their relevant executives to become members of the Impact Council. And we've seen tremendous growth. And what we love about that, going back to what Rafat was saying, which is you can either get money from your consumers or you can get money from your advertisers. These are people who love us. They love the fact that Fast Company honored them. They respect the journalism. They respect the communities that we're building. And so it's a lot easier and, frankly, more rewarding to tuck those people into membership than trying to service an advertiser who may or may not have budget, and then is going to nickel and dime you on every single piece of fulfilling the contract. I wanted micro-targeting, and I wanted to reach chief design officers in North Carolina who have 13 employees. No one can service that client. Versus somebody who's like, I am a chief design officer. I love Fast Company. Not only do I want to be a member of your community and pay a membership fee, but I'm going to write stories for you, and I'm going to come to your events, and I'm going to give you content. It's a great model for us.
A couple of small things that come to mind. LinkedIn has become our probably biggest channel in general, outside of own channels as in email and stuff. I mean, we're probably the largest B2B media brand on LinkedIn. I don't know the full numbers for everybody, but between my following and Skift's following, we're like million something. And so it brings in a lot of readership. People I meet at our conference say, we love Skift. I read your LinkedIn. I said, no, go to the site. Don't read my just LinkedIn. Go to the site. It'd be great. But we do focus a lot of attention on only, at this point for us, it's only one channel, like X Who Cares. And we're B2B, so it doesn't really matter, probably somewhat similar. But you have a more consumer reach than we do. But LinkedIn has really emerged as this really powerful channel. We market everything through it. We launched our first ever India conference last this March, Skift India Summit. Indian travel market is booming, domestic as well as outbound. You go here outside, half of the tourists are, probably majority of the tourists in Times Square are Indians these days, because Chinese haven't come out in the volume that they were, that people thought they would post-COVID, etc. All this other stuff that's happening, but it was we thought, U.S. dollars versus Indian rupees, it won't make tons of money. Should we put the effort in? We made money hand over fist on this, and hugely profitable. Probably our best ever year one conference we've done anywhere in the world. We've done in Singapore, London, New York, bunch of other places, etc. We made tons of money. So the general myth that the Indians cannot pay equivalent dollar amounts that we command here, while not completely gone, there's a lot of money in India. From that perspective. So that's another example of it.
Wow. So you heard it here first. There are at least 3 tips from these 3 panelists. 1, put up that paywall early. 2, figure out how to create your own community that isn't being served. And 3, go to India.
Yeah. I mean, it's
and LinkedIn,
it's hard
and LinkedIn.
doing business in India, but again, we can have that conversation.
Ami, also, you've been advising so many different companies through Hoxton. Tell us a little bit about what Hoxton is, and also if there's any other kind of leverage points or undue wild successes you've been seeing in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So I launched Hoxton about a year ago. We're a business strategy company focusing on strategy and marketing for a range of companies we have fintech clients, CPG, and of course tech platforms, really again focusing on community. That's a trend that I'm continuing to see where businesses want to authentically create community, engage and build an audience, because that's ultimately what leads them to growing and scaling their business. And what I'm really seeing is this gravitation towards the community economy through, businesses creating opportunities, like the example of a council, curated dinners. There's a platform and app I'm involved in called Communia, which is a safe space for Gen Z and millennial women to, talk about work, dating, etc. But it's that shared ethos. It's people coming together, and there's opportunities to monetize through featured product features within the application, as well as that translating into IRL through different events, and again having people come together. So I think there's something really kind of the theme between what we're all talking about, which is that need for a deeper connection, whether that's through a business, a brand, or just finding people who you can identify with and relate to, and that's becoming much more authentic than traditional advertising.
So I kind of want to hear from the audience. How many of you are working at a company that's kind of thinking about how to build more community? Okay. And how many of you are either individual influencers or creators who are trying to figure out how to build your brand? Okay, so we have a mix of everything here. And then I would say, has anybody been thinking a lot about monetization and how to actually earn a little bit more? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of nods, but no one raising their hands.
We love a side hustle.
We love a side hustle. So this is a question I'd have for you all. If you were to start a content company today, or a media company, whichever phrase you'd like to use, what would you do?
I would look at the market and find, where is there a niche? Where is there an opportunity or a demographic that's not being served? And how can you create something that speaks directly to them? And that would be through the branding, the messaging, and also showing up in places that community is at, where are they at, meeting them where they are online or where they are IRL, and really being very thoughtful and creating something just for that niche.
This is going to sound like a very boring, dutiful answer, but I got my start in local media, and I've been really saddened to see the hollowing out of local news media and ethnic news media. And so I've had this idea, and I don't know if it would ever be possible, but I think if I were to start a new media company, what I would love to do is build a consortium of college newsrooms and have college students report on the local communities in which they operate and live, and then use that to create basically a national news organization, but focused on local. So you'd have the ballast of a local backer, a national backer, but having college students basically fill the gap that local newspapers can no longer fulfill.
That's a really good idea.
That's a great idea.
I have
If there's any funders out there,
Yeah.
come see me.
There must be some
yeah.
investors.
Well, she also knows there's no funders out there, but unfortunately,
Philanthropists then.
Philanthropists. I have a similar, by the way, I have a similar local network idea, which this is my second company. I'm not doing another company ever again. It's a lot of work. I would. I know B2B, so that's where I can. I have the most, I don't know, advice, perspective, whatever you want to call it. There's still a lot of white space in serving professional communities, and their inbuilt business models, because their inbuilt advertiser subscription community, to learn from the best of the consumer web and bring it to sort of the business web, whatever you want to call that. And in general, the thing about media, that like you look at markets and you say, there's no way another company can go into whatever, CPG retail or energy drinks, whatever it is. Media always has a white space, always, because it's sort of a personal creation, your point of view, your worldview that you're bringing to life, and that then resonates with people. So that's why you see people keep launching new stuff, and then the tech media of 25 years ago, when you and I were doing this CNET. Look at what happened to CNET that just got sold for pennies on the dollar to Ziff Davis, which is irony because CNET bought Ziff Davis 20 years ago. So anyway, to the tech blogs that came, to them being disrupted by the next wave, and I don't know, it's the wave 4, whatever, of tech media, if you will. So point being that there's tons of ways to look at professional world, whatever, fashion, music, boring, back-end B2B, and create media and content businesses. Doesn't have to be traditional news-based media. Could be any type of media from the spectrum of what we're talking about.
What are some trends that you're excited by? So I feel like recently we've been hearing about these like multi-hundred million podcast deals. Mm-hmm. Everyone says, investors also say, media is dead, but then there'll be another media company that pops up like Semaphore and will raise like 19 million off the bat. What is this kind of, back and forth that we're seeing? So what are some trends that you are seeing, and what's the reason behind why we're seeing that?
Very, very little. So all of these deals that you see, follow them through, because at some point the most of the people will lose their shirt on most of these deals. So success stories on actual exits for people who've invested in quote unquote media, is that number is shrinking. So in general, raising money is one thing, being able to deliver on it is another thing. So that I'll caution on that part. What was the question again?
It's like, what are some trends you're seeing? Because I'm seeing these like 100 million podcast deals.
Yeah.
I'm seeing like the Hawk to a Girl apparently has a podcast
even the
as well.
podcast. I mean, you may know more about these podcast deals. I saw there's like a new wave of people wanting to launch subscription podcasts. That there was a wave 3, 4, 5 years ago, didn't work, of paid podcasts, and turns out New York Times is about to launch something. I saw yesterday, some headline, and a few others. Maybe it's going to work this time. These deals are talent deals, essentially. Then do they give the return to whoever's paying that $100 million 5 times over, 10 times over? It's still doubtful. It's still too early to say.
Yeah, I would say the trend I'm seeing, and this is, I'm neither bullish nor bearish on the trend, but just stating an observation. There's a real bifurcation. I think there's the scale players are just going to get bigger, and the niche players are going to have to get more and more specific. I think it's going to be very hard to live in the middle. And so, and by the way, the middle is not that small. But I look at a Washington Post or a CNN. I mean, those are not small sites, and yet they are definitely going to have to figure out what their path forward is, and it's not entirely clear. So I feel like and I don't see this changing in the foreseeable future. I think the big are going to get bigger. The niche are going to continue to have to mine their specific communities or their areas of interest, or get even more crisp and have a clearer identity. I mean, I think Juggernaut is a great example of a media property that knows who it is and knows who its audience is. If you're in the middle, it's tough.
That's actually wild to hear. You're considering CNN in the middle, which is like a major news outlet. But at the same time, it's like, how are they evolving? You know, when you do have all of the, you know, like the podcast industry is just so saturated, but then you do have these breakout talents coming through. So there is this real polarization happening in media. And I agree. It's like, what does that future look like? It's going to be dependent on maintaining an audience and maintaining also quality content and keeping the audience engaged, but also educating them depending on what this, you know, what the media outlet is.
I mean, I think CNN is mid-sized because compared to, I think what you're saying is like Facebook and type of companies.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a Meta or something.
Right,
yeah.
right. I mean, for those who are streaming, I did not mean to imply that CNN is small, but compared to and so the big being the Metas and the YouTubes but you know, even within news media, I think you've got the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, which have their specific niches, and then, you know,
It falls very rapidly.
it falls off very quickly.
And they push their subscriptions very hard. You only get like 2 free articles.
But I mean, you know, look at the size of their organizations too. I mean, and all credit to both of those organizations. I mean, certainly before Rupert Murdoch bought the Wall Street Journal, I was there, and it did not seem like it was on a growth trajectory at all. And similarly, I mean, I remember when Carlos Slim was bailing out the New York Times. I mean, it did not seem like that organization had a bright future. And because of subscriptions, both have really thrived. I mean, that is the thing that those two brands have in common and have been unwavering in pushing.
One of the trends that sort of seems to be interesting of where it'll go is not a new trend at all, is the email newsletter and sort of where that's going. And as we can probably attest, both of us, and maybe, I don't know if OnlyFans had that, but email is going through a tough time. Just the privacy issues and all the changes on, you know, whether Apple or 20 other people keep pushing on email in general. So that said, email continues to be the mainstay for companies like ours. It's the biggest channel, it's the biggest owned channel. But then you realize at some point it's not owned because it really depends on the mercy of Apple and Google and others as well. So ultimately, there's no real owned channel unless you're bringing people in real life, and that's kind of where I guess people want to go. But email continues to be interesting, and whatever new things emerge in it will be there.
Makes a ton of sense. I only have one last question for you, and I hope we can incorporate 2 because I know we're running a little behind. But, you know, how are you all incorporating AI into your processes? What seems like most exciting? What seems most challenging? And I think to connect it to this audience, I feel like I continuously meet such amazing creative souls who do still want to go into journalism, or who still want to go into the creator economy, or who want to start their own brands. What's your advice to them? So those are my last 2 questions.
Don't.
I'm very bullish on AI. I use it every day. I have the Chat GPT app. I use it like Google. I talk to it. It's my friend. And there's so many AI tools and plugins. It's not there to replace your own creativity or ideas. It's actually there to make your workflow easier, streamline processes, support on copy editing, content producing. You're seeing different, from project management all the way through to content and video creation, editing. So I do believe in embracing AI and finding tools that you can plug into your day-to-day to make it just really easier and streamlined. You're still thinking for yourself. Your AI is not, replacing human reasoning, although some say it may, but I do believe that it's there to make your workflow and life a lot easier.
So we use a lot of AI I work similar to you in my daily flow as the CEO, memos, not for it to write, but to structure it for me. So we do that a lot. I do that a lot for in my daily use and just as a thinking partner for just a lot of stuff. We launched something called Ask Skift in May last year, so early enough, which was a chatbot trained on, back then we're 11 years old, now we're 12 as a company, on every piece of Skift content that has ever been created, news, research, conference transcripts, public company, because we cover a lot of public companies in the travel industry, so their filings as well, to create sort of an answer. A chatbot for you to ask, for instance, if you want to ask, what are the last 5 years of Airbnb's marketing spend? You're in the industry, that's what you would need for your presentation. So instead of hunting for stories, we have all of that is just buried in stories. So so that we launched in May last year, whose new version, Ask Skift 2.0, we launched 2 weeks ago. Amazing. So we sort of pivoted from a chatbot paradigm to an answer engine paradigm, because it's a sort of a different way of thinking about it. It's a lot. We're using OpenAI's APIs to do it, so it's the newest version of it. It's a lot more advanced, etc. So that launched 2 weeks ago. Internally, we're doing for things like, I'm sure maybe your team is doing too, like headlines, and we launched summaries on our research reports, which are long. So there's some auto summaries and a bunch of other stuff we launched as well. So we're using it quite a lot. We're not using it for image generation. We've done a little bit here and there. But again, if it as the CEO with almost 100 people in a company now, for me, it's never been, oh, I should be able to cut people and replace AI. It's my people better be supercharged using this. So again, that's kind of the attitude.
Yeah, and really quickly, I would just double down on that. We created an AI working group inside our company, and I was really careful in creating the group to say this is not an efficiency committee. This is not how we are going to use AI to eliminate positions. It's really about how do we get smart about using it in our organization. And one of the first things to emerge from that committee was, let's put some guardrails around it too, because we don't want our artists or our creative directors or our art folks asking for art to be created in the style of Andy Warhol, or because that's a surefire way to, one, run afoul of copyright and IP protections, but also we are an intellectual property company, and we don't want anyone else saying, let's do an article in the style of Stephanie Mehta. Like that would be that we want to make sure that we sort of have good hygiene around that stuff. To your question, I would not say don't go into a career in media. I'm more bullish.
Journalism. I'm specifically saying journalism.
Even journalism, I'm not going to discourage people from a career in journalism. I still I'm Pollyanna-ish. I'm a practical optimist. I think that I still think it's the greatest career ever. So I would say I'd say go for it.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your wisdom, your insights, and some secrets about how to keep growing and monetizing. And I'd love to open it up for questions. A huge round of applause. Who wants to go first? Any questions?
See, I told you, it's a depressing world.
Yeah. I feel like there's one in the back. Phil, go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Phil. I work at News Corp, so I appreciate all the kind words about the Wall Street Journal. I would love to know how you're thinking about young audiences and how you're thinking about getting them onto your owned and operated platforms, because that's the challenge, I think, for so many legacy publishers when you're getting, hundreds of millions of views and tens of millions of UVs on platforms like YouTube, which is incredibly important for publishers like us, but how to get them to then convert to whether it's buying a subscription, going direct. I'd love to kind of get your view on how you're kind of viewing all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a question that we think about all the time, and quite honestly, I don't think we haven't cracked the nut on that. There's a couple of things. One is We do try for both of our sites to have a lot of content that targets early career folks. So at Fast Company, we have career advice. We call it Hit the Ground Running, and it's very specifically written. And I wouldn't say it's gendered, but we do believe that we attract a very large percentage of female readers who are in their first or second jobs trying to understand how to navigate the workplace. I think it's a really rich audience for us. So, and that's kind of a gateway to other content on the site. And on the Inc. side, every young person coming out of college or coming out of high school wants to be an entrepreneur, and Inc. really does sort of exist to serve and empower entrepreneurs. So we're hoping that we can create content for that creator, for that entrepreneur, for that aspiring person who maybe is trying to take their side hustle and turn it into a business.
I remember Inc. was one of the first people to even recognize the Juggernaut. I think we made one of their under 30 lists or 30 media companies to watch out for quite early on. And I was so shocked that they even discovered us. So Inc. is doing a lot of hard work in terms of bringing visibility to new companies. So thank you for doing that, and Fast Company as well. Any other questions? Okay. Well, oh yeah, go ahead. We'll make you the last question, and then we're going to move on to consumer.
Perfect, thanks. Hi, my name is Fahad. I'm wondering how each of the folks on the stage thinks about churn. So we talked a lot about subscription models. We talked about advertiser models. How do you think about churn with each of those?
With churn, that's something that happens naturally, and you kind of just have to factor that in. And that's something you look at creators as entrepreneurs, so they think about that too when it comes to retention, engagement, and that's where, having a robust content strategy, having multiple touch points with fans, with your audience, creating exclusive opportunities for them and keeping them engaged, and also thinking about the future, with community and community building. That's where I see more fan-to-fan engagement versus just, a big influencer talent to a mass audience. So there's a lot of opportunities to kind of create barriers to prevent the churn. So there's, more engaged retention.
I think that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hopefully you don't have to think about it too much. Thank you so much, everyone. A huge round of applause yet again.
Thank you.